Hello students and welcome to my class, English for Academic and Professional Purposes or Eapp. Ako po si Teacher Jenna. Disclaimer lang po, I am not an expert in this field, but I promise you na gagawin ko ang lahat para ma-discuss ko ng maayos ang mga lessons natin for this particular subject. Here are the objectives for this today's lesson. First, define critique. Second, identify the various approaches in writing a critique. And the third one, criticize the texts using the different approaches of criticism. And the last one, apply the appropriate critical approaches in writing your critique. Okay, lesson 1, critical approaches in writing a critique. Ano nga ba ang critique? So, what is critique? A critique is a careful analysis of an argument to determine what is said, how well the points are made, what assumptions underlie the argument, what issues are overlooked, and what implications are drawn from such observations. It is a systematic yet personal response and evaluation of what you read. So, kapag sinabi natin you are critiquing a written work, you are actually evaluating, reviewing, or examining one's work based on what you have read by means of careful analysis. So, it is a genre of academic writing that briefly summarizes and critically evaluates a work or concept. So, critics can be used to carefully analyze a variety of works such as, una, yung mga creative works, kagaya ng novels, exhibits, even film, di ba? Marami tayong nababasa na mga film reviews. Even images, pwede nating i-critique yung mga images. And syempre, poetry. Another one is yung mga research works, kagaya ng monographs, journal articles, systematic reviews, and theories. Ang ibig sabihin ng monograph, ito ay detailed written study of a single specialized subject written by a single author. Kaya siya mono kasi single subject lang yung gusto niyang itackle dun sa kanyang written work. And then, syempre yung media, yung mga news reports, and feature articles. So, like an essay, a critique uses a formal academic writing style and has a clear structure. That is, an introduction, body, and conclusion. However, the body of a critique includes a summary of the work and a detailed evaluation. The purpose of an evaluation is to gauge the usefulness or impact of a work in a particular field. Kasi, ang isang written work, hindi siya basta-basta pwedeng i-publish, unless ito ay nakritik na ng mga experts. Kasi kailangan malaman natin, ano ba yung purpose niya? Ano ba yung usefulness ng kanyang written work? Kung bakit gusto niya itong mai-publish. So, yun yung kahalanan. Kaya kinikritik muna ang isang written work bago siya mai-publish. Okay, so why do we write critiques? First, writing a critique on a work helps us to develop a knowledge of the work's subject area or related works. Kumbaga, ikaw bilang critic, mas lumalawak yung iyong kaalaman sa different subject area na iyong kinikritik. Second, an understanding of the work's purpose, intended audience, development of argument, structure of evidence, or creative style. So, nalalaman mo din dito, bakit ba niya sinulat ito? Ano yung purpose niya? Sino yung kanyang, para kanino ito? Sino yung intended audience? And syempre, nadidevelop din sa'yo bilang isang critic, yung creative style na pwede mo ring gayahin kapag ikaw naman yung sumulat ng written work. And a recognition of the strengths and weaknesses of the work. Syempre, every written work, meron siyang strengths, meron siyang weaknesses. So, pwede mo siyang i-critique, no? Na sobra itong strengths mo. Ito yung kulang dun sa iyong written work. Next, how to write a critique. So, before you start writing, it is important to have a thorough understanding of the work that will be critiqued. Kasi nga, ikaw yung magkikritik, no? So, dapat, naintindihan mo kung tungkol saan ba yung work na ikikritik mo. Ayan, the first one is study the work under discussion. Kailangan may background ka, no? Doon sa written work na iyong ikikritik. Next one is, pwede kang mag-make notes on key parts of the work. So, make notes or annotation. And then the third one, develop an understanding of the main argument or purpose being expressed in the work. So, ayan, develop an understanding. Ano ba yung main argument or purpose na gustong i-express nung writer dun sa kanyang written work? And then this one, consider how the work relates to a broader issue or context. No, wag mong ilimit, yung iyong pagkikritik dun sa nababasa mo dun sa kanyang written work. Kailangan ma-relate mo siya in general. May epekto ba in general? So, importante yon. Okay, so the following are the different approaches in writing a critique. The first one is the formalist. This approach regards literature as a unique form of human knowledge that needs to be examined on its own terms. All the elements necessary for understanding the work are contained within the work itself. Of particular interest to the formalist critic are the elements of form, the style, the structure, the tone, the imagery, and so on, that are found within the text. A primary goal for formalist critics is to determine how such elements work together with the text's content to shape its effect upon readers. So, kapag sinabi nating formalist, ang concentration niya ay nasa form. No, ano yung style na ginamit? Kompleto ba yung structure niya? The tone, the imagery, and so on and so forth. Na kung saan all the elements necessary for understanding the work ay nandoon din mismo sa work itself. Sabi, are contained within the work itself. No? Ayun ang kanyang primary goal. And then, gusto niyang i-determine kung paano yung mga elements na yon ay magkakatugma at nagkakaroon ng epekto dun sa kanyang mga reader. No? Ulitin natin, ang formalist, ang concentration niyan ay nasa form. Ang kinikritik niya, ang lahat ng mga bagay na gusto niya i-critic sa isang written work ay gusto niya nandun lang sa work itself. Hindi siya kukuha sa labas, hindi niya i-compare yung work dun sa other literary piece. Basta yun yung kanyang concentration, yung elements of form. Okay, so now let's look at the advantages, no, in using the formalism approach or the formalist approach. So, formalism pros or the advantages of formalism. The first one, it gives a better understanding of the writer's techniques in writing. For example, yung literary devices na ginamit niya, gaya ng mga figures of speech, and so on. So, yung mga figures of speech, ito yung, and literary devices, ito yung mga simile, metaphor, personification, and so on. Ginamitan ba nung writer, no, yung kanyang written piece ng mga literary devices. And then, the second one, it works best when applied to poetry and short story fiction. So, madalas ginagamitan ng formalism yung mga poems and short story fiction. The third one is that it emphasizes the value of the text instead of its context. So, ang focus niya ay nandun lang mismo sa text. Wala dun sa surrounding word or passage that gives meaning to the text. No? And then, the fourth one, it can be done without much research as structure is the only focus. Formalism nga siya. So, ang concentration niya ay nasa form or nandun lang sa structure. And then, it is a well-known approach and it develops close reading skills because you need to look into the literary devices. So, kapag formalism yung ginamit na approach, uulit-ulitin mo siyang basahin. Kaya, matidevelop yung iyong close reading skills. Kasi, maghahanap ka, ginamitan ba siya ng literary devices? Asan dito yun? No? Kaya, it develops close reading skills. Dahil paulit-ulit mo siyang babasahin. Okay. So, syempre kung meron tayong pros, meron din tayong cons o meron din tayong disadvantages. So, formalism cons or disadvantages, the first one, it is time-consuming based on the text size and writing style of the author. Its context is ignored and text is analyzed in a more technical way because it is more of structure, gaya ng sinabi ko kanina. Kung meron kayong nabasang uncommon word, no, dun sa mga text na yon, hindi na niya bibigyan ng emphasis na i-explain pa yung meaning ng word na yon. No? Kasi nga, ang focus lang niya ay structure. Third one is that it is not compatible with all types of text. It ignores other aspects such as historical, psychological, and gender aspects. There are similarity of conclusions because it is only after of the form. Basta ang focus niya nasa form lang. Kaya yung mga conclusions, there are times na similar yung mga conclusions ng mga written pieces. Okay, so tapos na tayo sa formalist approach. The second one is the gender criticism. So this approach examines how sexual identity influences the creation and reception of literary works. Originally, an offshoot of feminist movements, gender criticism today includes a number of approaches, including the so-called masculinist approach, recently advocated by poet Robert Bly. The bulk of gender criticism, however, is feminist and takes as a central precept that the patriarchal attitudes that have dominated Western thought have resulted, consciously or unconsciously, in literature full of unexamined male-produced assumptions. So, kapag ang ginamit naman natin sa pagkikritik ay yung gender criticism, ang hahanapin mo naman dito, dun sa literary piece ba o dun sa literary work, sino yung nag-dominate? Lagi bang lalaki ang bida dyan? O kaya naman ay parang na-overpower na sila ng mga kababaihan. No? Gender criticism. Kasi hindi ba, na-influensyahan tayo ng patriarchal attitudes ng Western countries na ang perception natin laging lalaki ang mas malakas, lalaki dapat ang pinuno, lalaki ang nagdo-dominate. No? So, dito sa gender criticism, kailangan magkaroon ng equality. Okay, so the third one is the feminist criticism. So, ito ay kadugtong lang nung second na gender criticism, no? So, feminist criticism attempts to correct this imbalance by analyzing and combating such attitudes by questioning, for example, why none of the characters in Shakespeare's play Othello ever challenged the right of a husband to murder a wife accused of adultery. So, kung nabasa nyo kasi yung play ni Shakespeare na ang title ay Othello, ito kasi istorya ni Othello, no? He is a heroic black general na napatay niya or pinatay niya yung kanyang wife because of false accusation, no? Actually, hindi rin naman kasalanan ni Othello na kung bakit niya napatay yung kanyang wife. Yun ay dahil sa mali yung information na na-feed sa kanya. At yun yung pinaniwalaan niya. Kaya niya napatay yung kanyang asawa. Sabi dito, by questioning, bakit wala dun sa mga characters dun sa play ang nag-challenge nung right ni Othello nung husband? Kung bakit niya napatay yung kanyang wife, no? So, dito pa lang parang makikita muna na mas pabor ba sa babae yung play ni Shakespeare na ito na Othello. Parang hindi nabigyan ng justice si Othello dito, yung husband, no? So, kung gusto nyo malaman yung full story nung play na Othello, search nyo na lang, maganda yung play na ito. Okay? So, feminist critics include analyzing how sexual identity influences the reader of a text. Kuminsan kasi kapag mas dominant yung role ng lalaki sa isang play or sa isang literary piece, no, naapektuhan din yung ating mga readers. And examining how the images of men and women in imaginative literature reflect or reject the social forces that have historically kept the sexes from achieving total equality. Yun lang naman ang goal ng feminist criticism, no? Ang magkaroon ng equality, yung both sexes, yung male and female. So, here are the questions to be asked for feministic approach. Letter A, how are women's lives portrayed in the work? No, yung portrayal ng mga babae dun sa literary piece. Letter B, is the form and content of the work influenced by the writer's gender? So, kung babae yung writer, na-influensyahan ba niya yung content ng kanyang work? Or kung lalaki ba yung gender ng writer, ganun din ba? Naapektuhan ba yung content ng kanyang ginawang work? Letter C, how do male and female characters relate to one another? Are these relationships sources of conflict? Are these conflicts resolved? Nagkakaroon ba ng conflict between the opposite sexes dun sa story? Letter D, does the work challenge or affirm traditional views of women? Kumbaga na-portray ba na ito lang yung mga ginagawa kapag ikaw ay babae, no? Or nabigyan ba ng justice na kung kayang gawin ng lalaki, kaya rin gawin ng babae? Letter E, how do the images of women in the story reflect patriarchal social forces that have impeded women's efforts to achieve full equality with men? Kasi hindi ba sa society natin ngayon, pag sinabi nating padre de pamilya, so mas mataas ang tingin nila kesa sa mga kababaihan kasi lalaki siya, no? So, dito ba sa literary piece na binasa mo ay na-achieve ba yung full equality ng women with men? Letter F, what marital expectations are imposed on the characters? What effect do these expectations have? So, kung yung mga characters dun sa story ay married na-portray ba nila yung kanilang role bilang husband or bilang wife? Letter G, what behavioral expectations are imposed on the characters? What effect do these expectations have? So, yung behavior ba ng mga characters bilang isang babae at bilang isang lalaki ay nabigyan nila ng justice? Letter H, if a female character were male, how would the story be different? And vice versa. Kung nagkapalit ba ng character yung male and female, paano ba ang magiging takbo ng story? Letter I, how does the marital status of a character affect her decisions or happiness? So, hindi ba kapag married or ang status mo ay married na, yung happiness, kumbaga hindi lang sa isang tao nang gagaling yan. Both, no? Kasi nga, married na kayo. So, pwede kasing apekto sa happiness ng isang tao yung relationship niya bilang single or bilang married. Next, the fourth one is the historical criticism. So, this approach seeks to understand a literary work by investigating the social, cultural, and intellectual context that produced it. A context that necessarily includes the artist, biography, and milieu. So, pagka historical yung i-critic natin, so medyo broad ito, no? Kasi kasama dito yung social, yung cultural, yung intellectual context. And necessarily includes the artist, biography, o yung history ng buhay ng artist na yon, including that person's social environment. Kasi nakaka-apekto yun, ano, kung bakit historical yung kanyang literary piece. No, pag nalaman nyo yung kanyang social environment. So, a key goal for historical critics is to understand the effect of a literary work upon its original readers. For example, yung historical literary piece na ginawa niya ay about yung history dito sa Philippines. No? Siyempre, ang goal mo bilang isang historical critic ay alamin ano ba yung epekto ng literary work na ito dun sa original readers. At sino yung mga original readers? Dahil history ng Philippines yan, ang original readers yan ay tayong mga Filipino. Dapat maintindihan mo yung epekto nung literary piece na ito doon sa original readers. And then the fifth one is the reader response criticism. This approach takes as a fundamental tenet or ano bang ibig sabihin ng tenet? Ito yung belief or principle that literature exists not as an artifact or hindi lang siya basta isang object upon a printed page but as a transaction between the physical text and the mind of a reader. Dapat merong transition, no, mula dun sa binasa papunta dun sa isip nung or dun sa mind ng reader. Nagkaroon ba ng epekto, no? Na-retain ba dun sa isip ng reader yung kanyang binasa? So, it attempts to describe what happens in the reader's mind while interpreting a text. Tayo bilang mga readers, kung minsan magkakaiba tayo ng interpretation. So, kapag reader response criticism ang ginamit mo, ikikritik mo kung ano ba yung epekto nito dun sa reader, yung interpretation nila, no? And reflects that reading, like writing, is a creative process. So, number 6 is structuralism. Structuralism focused on how human behavior is determined by social, cultural, and psychological structures. It tended to offer a single unified approach to human life that would embrace all disciplines. The essence of structuralism is the belief that things cannot be understood in isolation. They have to be seen in the context of larger structures which contain them. For example, the structuralist analysis of Donne's poem, Good Morrow, demands more focus on the relevant genre, the concept of courtly love, rather than on the close reading of the formal elements of the text. So actually, when I read this poem, yung Good Morrow, ang interpretation ko din dito is ito yung tula na about courting, love story na inirelate niya sa worldly experience niya, Yung structuralism kasi is interpreting and analyzing literary piece that focuses on contrasting ideas, and show how they relate to the whole structure, contrasting love story tapos worldly experience. So paano niya napagdugtong o ano yung naging relation nung dalawa na yon? So in structuralism, a piece is open to interpretation. So lahat ng makakabasa ng tula na yan, pwede siyang magkaroon ng sarili niyang interpretasyon. The text is based on the reader's understanding, which means different readers, different understanding, different interpretation. So, which may involve personal belief, environment, behavior, kasama na din dyan yung moral perception. So, yun yung structuralism. So, the last approach in writing a critique is the sociological. So, sociological focuses on man's relationship to others in society, politics, religion, and business. So, one good way to define sociological approach is seeing the general in particular. So, this definition tells us that sociologists look for general patterns in the behavior of particular people. So, general patterns in terms of their the kind of society they have, yung politics in that particular place, their kind of religion, and even yung kanilang economical status and yung mga businesses. So, kapag yung written piece or literary piece is all about society, so ang ginamit nilang approach dyan is sociological. So, those were the 7 approaches in writing a critique. So, sana ay makatulong sa inyo yung mga simple explanations ko tungkol sa 7 approaches na yan, So, for this, okay, ito lang yung activity na ipapagawa ko sa inyo. So, ito ay nandun sa inyong module, So, you will do activity 3. So, ang title nito ay Read Critically. So, ganun pa din tayo, Pwede nyong answeran yung iba pang activity na nandun sa inyong module kung gusto nyong i-assess yung level ng inyong understanding about the lesson. And then, pwede nyong i-counter-check yung mga sagot ninyo dun sa mga answer key na nandun sa last page ng inyong module. Pero, in this module, ito yung gusto kong bigyan nyo ng focus or gusto kong gawin ninyo yung activity number 3, which is yung read critically. So, itong activity na ito, ang gagawin nyo muna is, ito sabi sa directions, get the meaning of these words from any dictionary so that you can understand what you are reading better. So, you may write your answer on a piece of paper. So, syempre, para mas maintindihan nyo yung inyong babasahin. Meron kasi kayong babasahin dito na ikikritik ninyo siya. So, better na hanapin nyo muna sa dictionary yung meaning ng mga words na ito. Yung cynic, demoralize, destabilize, anarchic, unrelentingly, chronic disease, callous, predominant, transcend, authentic, at saka vigorously. Kasi, anong importance nito? Kasi kung alam niyo yung meaning ng bawat words na ito, these are, siguro kung para sa iba, no, these are uncommon words. So, kailangan alam natin muna, ano ba yung ibig sabihin ng mga words na ito para kapag nagbasa na kayo nung literary piece na ipapabasa ko sa inyo, may idea na kayo kung tungkol ba saan yung babasahin ninyong literary piece. So, hanapin nyo muna yung meaning ng mga words na ito from any dictionary, no? And then, ito yung babasahin ninyo. Yung ang bayan muna bago ang sarili. This is an excerpt from the homily of Jaime Cardinal Sin at the Mass celebrating the 5th death anniversary of Ninoy Aquino. So, ito yung ikikritik ninyo, no? And you will answer the given questions, no? Una ang gagawin nyo, hanapin nyo muna yung meaning ng mga words sa dictionary, and then you will read the excerpt, and then pangatlo, sasagutin nyo lang itong dalawang question na ito. So, question number 1, what critical approach did he use nung writer, nung author? No, explain why you think that is the approach. And then number 2, do you agree with the author or not? Why or why not? So, yung gagawin ninyo, yung activity number 3. So, thank you, and I will end my presentation with this quotation, believe you can, and you're halfway there. No? Thank you so much, and I'll see you on our next video lesson.